we can start with the streaming as well. I mean, sorry, recording of the lecture. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, we are live.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 12's set of interactive uh, live sessions. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Ashwin Vishwanathan here with us today to give us a guest lecture on citizen science in ornithology. So first we'll start with the introductions. Dr. Ashwin is a citizen scientist and facilitator of citizen science. He's also a birder and naturalist. He did his PhD in ecology from ETH Zurich, and currently he's a research associate at Nature Conservation Foundation, Bangalore. And he's currently involved in two projects such as Bird Count India and State of India's Birds under NCF's Education and Public Engagement Program. His work has helped greatly in spreading awareness about the power of citizen science and how one can harness it for better documentation, monitoring, as well as conservation of India's birds. So thank you so much for being here with us today, all to you.
Thank you, Nafisa. And thanks everyone for being here. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. So we are quite a small group. So if anybody has questions even through the presentation, raise your hand and one of us should be able to see and can get to it. You can also add your questions to that sheet, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll, through the presentation, I'll also ask some questions. So feel free to answer them in comments. So I'll be speaking about citizen science. And I don't know whether you've already had some discussion about citizen science or any of you have participated in citizen science initiatives. So I'll start off with a brief definition of what citizen science is. What is citizen science? So it's generally public participation in scientific research. Uh, Typically, we have scientific institutions. There are professional scientists who their professional lives revolve around doing research. But citizen science is this growing field that's developed after generally we realize as a community that when everybody participates in scientific research, there is much more that we can learn because everybody has the capability of being a scientist. So this is public involvement in not just data collection. You must have heard about citizen science projects where people contribute data. But that's not all it is. It's about public participation in every aspect of science. It's getting ideas, asking questions. Some of that I suppose you've done in the course already. Designing methods to answer that question, then generating the data, analyzing data, writing scientific articles. So it's the entire process. And as communities develop their scientific temper, there is more and more science that's produced from the general public. So this also involves collaboration with professional scientists. So citizen science projects typically involve somebody who can guide and mentor the growth of other scientists among the community. So why is it important? Can somebody tell me why is public participation in ornithology important? I already gave one or two reasons. Can you give one or two more reasons in the comments? Anyone? Feel free. There's no...
I am Rajasekhar. Hello.
Yeah, can you type your answers in the comments?
Yeah. Answer or can I speak?
Maybe we'll speak later at the end of the session so that cover everything.
Okay, I will in the chat. I will write.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
More people to cover more area, certainly. Scientists can't reach everywhere, so these are some really big reasons already. Birds are everywhere for greater reach. Yes. It also, like somebody said, for greater reach, it creates a larger community who understands science, understands birds, understands their importance, and learns to love and appreciate them, not just a few people in scientific institutions. There are so many more scientific questions that can come up. When you have 100 people thinking about birds and ornithology, there are only so many ideas that can come. But when you have tens of thousands of people thinking about the many things that they observe around them, why are things happening? Why are birds behaving a certain way? Why are there certain patterns that they're seeing in nature? Then there are so many more questions that come about. Then we progress as a community with greater scientific temper. Everybody learns to ask questions, go through the logical process, and produce science. So it does three things effectively. One is there is much greater reach. There is information that will come in from many more places, but also there are many questions that can be asked and answered, and everybody becomes a scientist. So that's important as a community for us to grow, because it's as a community we need to take logical decisions, or decisions based on evidence, and that is effectively what science is. So what is the history of citizen science in ornithology in India, that is? So the earliest citizen science project in India was the Asian waterbird census. So this began in 1987. And this was an initiative that was focused on wetlands, where people would go uh, to monitor wetlands in the winter to look largely for birds that use wetlands. And this was a focused initiative that is still going on today. And there were regional coordinators around the country, and through this entire period, there have been people who have gone out in January, February in winter and monitored wetlands alone. That was followed by the advent of internet in the in the late 90s, early 2000s, where Yahoo groups, India Nature Watch, and various platforms came about where people could share their photos, start discussions. And this was also actually citizen science, where suddenly there was collective knowledge. People were sharing their observations with each other, and they were getting nice ideas, and they were even understanding many more things than we previously understood. So this was the start of citizen science here, where again there were discussion groups and groups that led to some advancement of knowledge. In 2007, there was an initiative that called Migrant Watch that came up. And I don't know whether anybody here has participated in Migrant Watch, but it was focused primarily on migratory birds, and a small set of migratory birds to start off with. Then birds like rosy starling, grey wagtail, these are ones that are very distinctive. Everybody hears them or sees them as they start coming in July or August in many parts of the country. And Migrant Watch, there was a website where you could report just these birds. You could report rosy starlings, grey wagtail, and then later moved on to many more migratory birds. But it was focused on migratory birds, and the advantage and the reason for this was for us to understand when birds are arriving, when migratory birds are arriving in the country, and when they're leaving. And through this, already we started learning so much over these 7, 8 years. Suddenly knew when rosy starling comes into different parts of the country as it comes from outside India, and then how long it stays here, where it stays, and when is the last departure date, when is the last date that people see them. So these are two important things, that pieces of information that people used to contribute. When did they arrive and when did they depart? So then this around the 2013-14 was the advent of many more citizen science portals and platforms. So there was the India Biodiversity Portal, there was iNaturalist that came up a little later, there was eBird, there was the Biodiversity Atlas, and so many other citizen science tools and platforms. When they realized that there was a desire from the public to participate in more and more science. So it's not just restricted to birds, but any kind of nature. And if you do a Google search and look around, you see that there are citizen science initiatives about astronomy, about so many other things, so many other kinds of science, aside from nature-related science. And again, in the years following 2014, there are many programs that have sprung up to monitor birds. Some of you would have heard of the Great Backyard Bird Count. There's Pongal Bird Count, Bihu Bird Count. There's a common bird monitoring program. So there are many citizen science initiatives that have come up since then. So I hope the history of citizen science is somewhat clear in India. Now it has grown to so many citizen science platforms and so many different questions that people are able to answer using citizen science. But I will focus on eBird in this talk going on from now to show you the potential and scope for citizen science. This doesn't mean that this is the only citizen science platform for you to look at. There are many platforms that serve many different purposes. So I would encourage you after this talk to go and find out as much as you can about every citizen science platform and what you can learn from them. I'm just going to show you what you can learn from eBird. Any comments at this stage? Let me check. Okay. So what is eBird? eBird is just a digital notebook. This is often the case for citizen science platforms. It's just a place for you to, what you previously wrote down in a notebook. You drew a picture of a bird, you wrote down what you saw, some observations. This is what bird watchers used to do earlier. Nowadays, you can enter all of that online. So it's a memory for you as well. So you put it down in this notebook, and then later you can go and see what did I put in a checklist, how many birds were there, what did you notice about it? If you go 5 years later, if you go and look at a checklist, then it'll jog your memory. It'll tell you it'll take you back to some nice memories you had in the past. This is what a checklist on eBird looks like. This is from home, and there are 9 species. If you look here, you'll see that it's a stationary complete list, which means I was in one place and for 5 minutes, I looked at all the birds around me. And instead of putting it down in a notebook, I uploaded this to the platform and then it went on to eBird. And now what happens once it goes on to eBird, it's available for anybody to look at and for anybody to use this information in any way they like. So now, for example, I have reported one Asian coil in February. I have reported one Blythe-Reed wobbler in February. Now, what happens when as I make checklists into April, May, June, this Blythe-Reed wobbler, which is a migrant, is not going to be there. So anybody looking at my checklist can look at that and understand that Blythe-Reed wobbler is a migratory bird. It is not there in some months, it is there in other months. So when thousands of people put this information together, you get something like this. So what you see here, I think many of you have seen this map previously. Uh, Actually, there are no political boundaries drawn here. All of these points are checklist locations on eBird, and just the point themselves make up the entire boundary of the country. So it shows that in every corner of the country, there are people who have reported birds. And there are 50 million observations now on eBird, 2.5 million checklists. Over 40,000 birders have been uploading checklists, and all species in the country that have been reported in the country are reported here. Any questions about this map? Let me know in chat. What can we learn from citizen science? There are many things, there are many directions in which we can go, but I'll take you through a few of them. We can learn about distributions. Where are birds found? Right? And when are they found? We can learn about distribution. We can learn about seasonality and migration. When do they arrive in the country? When do they leave? When do they come to a particular area? What are the routes they follow? And we can get broad global ideas of migration. And migration is something that you must have already studied in this course or must have read something about. Uh, there can be bird atlases and systematic efforts and learnings that come from those. Now, these are not from casual birding. Casual birding is that when I feel like watching birds, I just go to my balcony, I note down whatever birds there are, and I upload it. Atlases and systematic birding is when you're following specific protocols. You're doing the protocol is that for 15 minutes, you have to watch birds in a certain area. Now, that is a more focused kind of citizen science that also has many great learnings that come from it because you're following a fixed method, fixed methodology. And then you can understand trends and status. How well is a bird doing? Has it increased from in the last 10 years? Has it decreased in the last 10 years? And this is really important because this has direct impacts on conservation. If you want to find out which birds to prioritize, should you put out nest boxes for sparrows? Should you feed peafowl? Should you tell your local government body uh, that you need to protect either a grassland or a wetland? Which one is important? They say that only one of these two can be protected. How would you know which one is more important for birds? Which birds of which area are declining, which ones are increasing? So all of this information you can get from citizen science because it's spread out across the country. And then you can learn a lot from the built-in tools on eBird itself and by downloading the data. A lot of this, everything that we spoke about, distribution, migration, status and trends, all of this you can learn about by downloading data from eBird and from other public platforms. All of this data is public. So any of you, if you want to download the data and learn more about birds, publish some scientific research about it, do some analysis, all of this data is available for public downloading. So it's important, the philosophy is important. Data that is generated by the people should also be available to the people to learn from. So what can you learn from inbuilt tools on eBird? I'll take some of these questions later. Maybe I'll answer one of them. How important is it to do daily checklists? Uh, so daily checklists are not something that you need to do. I think there are two advantages to doing daily 15-minute checklists. One is that it helps you become a much, much better birder. Every day it makes you focus for those 15 minutes. For those 15 minutes, your ears are completely tuned in, your eyes are completely tuned in, and you're making sense of everything that is there out there. And then as you do this regularly, day after day after day, you'll suddenly realize that you've improved so much as a birder. You're hearing much better, able to identify things more easily. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is that if everybody retains this 15 minutes, then there is some kind of consistency in in the way people are making checklists. And if there is consistency, it makes it much easier for analysis. So these are two advantages to making regular checklists. Another advantage is that the more the number of checklists you make, the more resolution you will have about the rarity or commonness of a bird. This is something I'll explain later. So I hope that answered some part of your question. I'll explain how to download data from eBird or what tools to use, what resources to look at that can teach you how to download data from eBird. Right. So first I'm going to show you how to explore on the website itself. So if all of you are sitting in front of a computer, which I assume you are, some of you might be on your mobile phones, I suggest you open the browser, open ebird.org and go to this page, go to explore. So that we can go together from here on. I'll take you through the steps to follow. So if somebody is not able to open, let me know. But I'll assume now that everybody has opened the website. Go to explore, click on bar charts. When you clicked on bar charts, you'll get the option of selecting a species region of interest. This is what the page will look like. You have India. Within India, you can select whichever region you're in. And then you can click on entire region. Later, you can look at more. Yeah, using iNaturalist to upload, that's fantastic. Yeah, any citizen science portal has its own advantages. But even if you're using iNaturalist to upload, you are welcome to learn as much as you can from the eBird website as well. You can look at iNaturalist website, you can look at this website. So for now, take a look at this website and see what you can learn from it. We won't talk about contributing data. We are going to talk about learning from all the data that people have uploaded. So here we go. Next step. You've selected a region of interest. Click continue. Now you'll be able to view bar charts for a range of species. Are you able to do that? Have you got that view of multiple species and bar charts for all of those species? Yes, anybody finding any difficulty here? Yeah, okay, great. This is what it'll look like. Can somebody tell me what, you can unmute yourself and say, what are you saying about bar-headed goose over here? Or Adishel duck in Karnataka? In the screen that I am showing, what are you seeing about bar-headed goose?
The
What are
months
these bars?
the months it has been seen and the months it has not been observed.
Yeah. So the height of the bar or the width of the bar, whichever one you want to call it, tells you how often it has been reported. If the bar is very large or very wide, that means that it's a very common bird. If the bar is little more constricted, that means it's a less common bird. So what you see is in some places the bar is very thin. That means that just one observation or two observations. It's not really when the species is there in good numbers. But what this tells you is that sometime in early November, bar-headed goose becomes regular in Karnataka. That's when it arrives. And then sometime in late March is when it leaves. So it actually arrives quite late and it leaves quite early. Does that make sense? Whereas if you look at
Yeah.
a species like Gagani, you actually see that they arrive much earlier. The bars start widening in September itself, and it stays till late April almost. Is that clear to everyone? How to read these bars? Lesser whistling duck is present year round, so it's a resident bird. So these are the ways you can look at this information that is uploaded by all of us, by the entire community, and learn from it. You can also click. There's some comments. Let me take a look. Yeah. Okay. So I suppose that's clear to everybody. Knob-billed duck is there in Karnataka year-round, but it's always thin, which means that it's an uncommon bird in most of the state, but it's present year-round. So it's a resident bird. In bar charts, you can also click on this. You see one map icon and you see another line icon, right? If you click on the line icon, you can get much more information about that species. So you click on the line icon, click on the icon maybe near Northern Shoveler, depending upon which place you're in. And then you can click on change date. There's an option that says change date, and you can select the last 5 years. You can select because you can select 2018 to 22, you can select 19 to 23, whichever group of years you prefer. And then check the separate years box. You can select a maximum of 5 years. Fine. Now, when you do that, you're going to get a comparison of what is happening in the different years. Then what you can do, this is really interesting. You can look at, you can compare the times when this bird has come every year. And if there is any impact of climate change, is there anything that is changing their arrival time or departure time, that will immediately stand out over here. So one thing I can point out over here is that in 2021, you can see that Northern Shavela arrived a little later. Can you make that out? The yellow line in 2021, most birds arrived only in the first week of October, whereas already by mid-September, they're reasonably common. I mean, they've come in decent numbers in all the other years. So there is something that has delayed their arrival in 2021. So these are small things that can be learned from these line graphs. Now here I've shown one species where there isn't so much different between the years. But actually, if you look at some other species, if you look at buntings, if you look at common cuckoo, I want you to go to that and look at that. Look at those species because you'll see that there are huge differences. There are years when they come in very good numbers. There are years when they come in very, very small numbers. Why that happens, nobody knows. But these are the things that give rise to questions that all of you, once you start asking questions and answering them, you will be able to answer. You can take that forward. Yes, yes, you can use all of this data in your research papers. Certainly, yes. This is all public data. Right? And you can ask all of these questions. And I want you to find some species where frequencies fluctuate between the years. I'll just explain what I mean by frequency over here. So you see this on the y-axis, you see it going from 0 to 10, correct? On the x-axis are the dates. On the y-axis, it goes from 0 to 10. Actually, that can go from 0 to 100. So it's a percentage which will go from 0 to 100. 10% means that in 10% of the checklists in 2019 January first week, this bird was seen in 10% of the checklists uploaded in the whole of Karnataka. Does that make sense? Now, the interesting thing is if I go back to September of 2019 and September of 2021. In September 2019, 1% of the checklist, 1 out of every 100 checklists in Karnataka had Northern Shavela. Whereas in 2021, not a single checklist had Northern Shavela, which means the species had not come into Karnataka at all by mid-September. So an important thing here is to ensure that every year there are people everywhere, there is coverage all over. But this is the general way to be able to interpret the data. Yeah. Any questions at this stage? Anything about interpreting this graph? All good? If nobody says anything or types anything, I'll assume that everybody has understood. Right? So everybody explore this page and find species that show interesting trends. I haven't shown the species that have the most interesting trends. So that's for you to explore and find out. Okay. Next, I'll take you to images. So as you know, as you may know, platforms like iNaturalist, eBird, etc., eBird are repositories of a huge number of images. People take really good photos of many species and they put them up here. But they also take photos that are taken with their mobile phones. There are the whole variation of photos that people take and upload. You get photos that show different behaviors. You get really high quality photos of a bird sitting with a nice background. You get photos of flocks of birds together. So when you look at these photos, there are many things you can learn from photos. So if you haven't looked at photos on eBird yet, go to again the Explore page, and there'll be one link that takes you to photos and audio. If everybody's found that link, and click there, and you can look at photos from around the world. Gajanan is saying that you check, but whole of India is not coming. So you can click on, so this location option may not be there at the moment. You'll have an option that says filter. You click on that filter, you'll have an option to put location. So there'll be a place where you can select India and you can look at photos from India alone. Photos from eBird at the moment cannot be used without restrictions. It's copyrighted to the photographer. But soon, hopefully, maybe in a year or 2 years, there will be a change where you can license your photos. On iNaturalist, you can already license your photos. For example, all my photos on iNaturalist, I put everything other than birds on iNaturalist. And all of those are Creative Commons. So anybody can download my photo and use it. They just need to give credit with the name, but they don't need to ask me. They can take the photo and use it for anything they want. So that is the licensing I've given, because that's the whole point of it. I'm taking those photos so that they can be of some kind of public benefit. So if any of you want to download any photos I've taken and use it for your research or anything, feel free. Even photos on eBird, without downloading, you can use it for your research. You can see how many times a certain behavior is being shown, how many times a bird is seen in a certain habitat, how many birds are white, how many birds are rufous, for paradise flycatchers. You can look at how often a particular color is seen. There are many things you can just look at the photos and study. I'll show you one or two examples of that. But first, I'll go to distributions. So distributions is something we already spoke about. Where do they spend the summer? Where do they spend the winter? So you see the breeding season for this bird, Blight's reed warbler, that leaves my house in April. Till early April, it's here. Then it goes all the way up to almost to Northern Europe, parts of Russia, So in Finland, they breed in Finland, they breed in Russia, and parts of Central Asia. They go quite far. They just go for 2-3 months and then they're back in September, October. They're back here. But you see, there is one thing very special about this bird. Although they have such a huge breeding range, they're there in a very, very large part of temperate Eurasia. And almost the entire population winters in India and the Indian subcontinent during winter. So during winter, these millions and millions of blight-sided warblers are entirely within the Indian subcontinent. They spend their time around houses. They do all sorts of they're a common backyard bird in the country in winter. Yes, you can assign comments, descriptions to photos when you upload them. Showing breeding plumage. Yes, you can. Indian blue robin, another bird that is a winter visitor here, and these are outputs that you can download on the eBird website. You can go to the eBird website. There'll be a place that says, I think, status and trends, and there's eBird science. If you click on that, you'll get all sorts of nice visualizations like this that you can use in your presentations. Of course, you can use to understand birds better yourself, but you can also use it to teach people more about birds. And these are modeled distributions in that they have taken information of where they have been reported. They've looked at the association with habitat. These are called species distribution models. And then they have also extrapolated to see whether the bird will occur or not occur in places where people haven't reported them. So you see that in many of these places in the Himalayas, there isn't much birding. But thanks to this association that they have got from the data that is already available, they have predicted an association with elevation and other factors across the entire range. So now the range is that in the whole of the Himalayas, going into some part of Northeast India, going into China, that is the breeding range. Then you see the yellow regions. These are the regions where it stops by on its way back. So on the way back, it goes through West Bengal, Bangladesh, and some part of Northeast India. On the way down, there was not enough data to figure out where they stop. So this will change. As we upload more and more information, we'll get better information about where exactly, which areas are important to them in different parts of their migratory cycle. Their wintering distribution is very clear over here. They're there in the hills of South India, Western Ghats, and Sri Lanka. But you see a very nice distribution that is doesn't include the Palakkad Gap. You must have heard about the Palakkad Gap already, right, Nafisa? Have they? It's this place which is the plains. It doesn't have the mountains in the Western Ghats, and according to the data, Indian blue robin doesn't winter there. It only sticks to the mountainous forested areas. So now we spoke about photos, right? And what can we learn from photos? So you can actually discover new phenomena from just looking at eBird photos and looking at data. So this is the distribution of Paradise flycatcher. It's the previous State of India's birds map of Paradise flycatcher. And you see some areas it says summer, some areas winter, and some areas it's present year-round. Year-round, most of the time means that they're both breeding and spending the winter in those areas. So you see one belt in South India. There are some areas where it's there year-round, but in most of the South, it's actually a winter visitor. So what this means is that there are some resident birds in the South, but also all these northern birds that are breeding in the Himalayas, breeding in these areas are also coming down. Is that clear to everybody? So there is a resident population. There is also a wintering population. Now, is there a difference between these two populations? That is the question. Now, how many people here have seen a paradise flycatcher? Many? How many have not seen a paradise flycatcher? Anyone here hasn't seen a paradise flycatcher? Yeah, you can let me know. Fine. So everybody has seen, I suppose. So paradise flycatchers are not uncommon bird, but you often don't see them looking so nice. There are two morphs that the males have. There is a rufous moth and a white moth. Right? Rufous moth is rufous colored, white moth is white colored. In both cases, they have black heads, but both of them are the same species, at least as far as we know now. Now, when is a paradise flycatcher rufous? When is it white? Some people say that young birds are rufous. Some people say that that there is no relationship with age. What is the answer? So far it is not known with certainty. See, somebody said rufous morph is younger. Now, the reason that people don't entirely believe the age theory is that in some parts of the south, in some parts of Sri Lanka, nobody has actually seen a breeding white moth. So that led us to do an exploration to see in the different months of the year, what is the morph of the males in different parts of the country. So I'll show you now one slightly complicated graph. And I think you must have had some experience going through graphs earlier in the course, right? Okay, so I understand that people have looked at graphs, but I'll take you through this graph. So this graph is divided into four uh, panels. There's one for summer, one for autumn, one for winter, and one for spring. These months are not important. It's just the year divided into four equal parts. Now, in these months, the understanding is that in summer, all the birds are going to be in their breeding areas. In spring, they're still moving through. In autumn, they're again moving through. In winter, they're all in their wintering areas. So the two important things for you to look at are summer, when they're breeding, and winter. Now you see the x-axis, there are 5 different divisions. Sri Lanka, South India, Central India, North India, East India, and the Himalayas. So divided into 5 different geographical regions, we're looking at summer and we're looking at winter. Now, we are also, how are these points and these lines above the points, what do they represent? This represents, you look at the y-axis here, it's a proportion of individuals of each morph for the males as seen in the photos. So it's easy to make out whether paradise flycatcher is male or female. Males have a black throat. Females have a grayish throat. So if you see a black-throated photo of a black-throated individual, then you can assign them to either rufous or white. Now, by going through all of the photos that are uploaded to eBird for the different months, for the different regions, also downloading the data and looking at what comments people have put. People often put comments, white male, rufous male. You can extract all of those comments from the downloaded data, look at which region and which month those comments are associated with, and you can get a proportion. So you can say now that in summer in Sri Lanka, almost 100% of the birds are rufous males. Does that make sense? And the lines and whiskers, as it's called, these represent uncertainty. So uncertainty is a function of how much data there is. If there are thousands and thousands of photos from Sri Lanka in summer, then this uncertainty will shrink. So uncertainty is a very important part of science. So actually Sri Lanka did not have so much data. So you see that we can say with confidence that is between around 70% and 100%. Between 70 and 100% of paradise flycatchers were rufous moth. Is that clear? In Sri Lanka in summer. Whereas in winter, actually there are more white moth in Sri Lanka than rufous moth. Is that clear to everybody? In South India as well, rufous moth, it's almost 80% rufous moth individuals and just a tiny proportion of white moth. Whereas in the winter, both rufous and white moths become almost equally likely. Yeah? That's clear to everyone? Now, what are you seeing
Yes.
in the Himalayas? In the Himalayas, we're seeing the opposite. In summer, almost all the birds are white moth, and rufous moth is very uncommon. In winter, there are no paradise flycatchers in the Himalayas at all. So it's empty. Right? In the eastern parts of the country, which is actually West Bengal, Orissa, those areas, it's almost equal in both summer and winter. In central India, it's equal in summer. So as you go from south towards the north, the likelihood of the rufous moth reduces. You see, rufous comes down, white goes up. So actually, it looks like this rufous and white is more a geographic thing. So actually, based on the breeding areas, in the south, almost all the breeding males are rufous males in the south and Sri Lanka. In the north, it's almost only white males. In the middle, both rufous and white males are there. Now, what does this mean? This clearly shows that it's not only an age thing. Even birds that are very old in the south and are breeding are rufous. Birds in the north are almost never rufous while breeding. So this tells us that there is something more going on. There could still be an age-related thing where the white moth birds are initially rufous at younger ages and then they become white. But what is clear that is in the south and Sri Lanka, rufous moth males never become white because only rufous moth breeding birds are seen. So this kind of thing, this learning is entirely now. What would people do typically? You'd go, you tag the birds, you get permission, you study it in multiple parts of the country, which is also a very important thing to do. But actually, now we have these data sets becoming available that help us get some understanding of such questions, even just from citizen science data. Uh, Go through this graph later. I think the video is also recorded, right? And in case you're not able to, you weren't able to understand this graph fully right away, take your time and try and understand it later. You can even discover potentially new species. So this is black-breasted weaver. Black-breasted weaver is like Baya weaver. It's Are they separate species? Then we don't know. We don't know whether they're separate species. The paradise flycatchers, maybe they're the same. Maybe they just have two different morphs in different places. We need to find out whether their songs are the same or their songs are different. We need to find out whether they're genetically the same or different. There's so much that we need to study based on this. But this gives us now the baseline to develop a study to understand paradise flycatchers better. Black-breasted weaver. This is an interesting case where actually a WhatsApp group turned out to be the scientific platform. There's a WhatsApp group of birders in Bangalore, and Bangalore is a very cosmopolitan place where there are people from all over the country in Bangalore and in WhatsApp groups, and this is true for many regions. So there's a discussion going on. Somebody had put a photo of a black-breasted weaver that looked like the bottom bird on the bottom right. And then somebody from Bombay who was on the group said, no, this is not a black-breasted weaver. Then the Bangalore people said, yes, it is a black-breasted weaver, people from the south. And then somebody from the east said, yes, it's a black-breasted weaver. Then somebody else from Delhi said, no, it's not a black-breasted weaver because this is not what it looks like. Then we found out that actually what people think are black-breasted weavers looks completely different in these two areas. And this is something that nobody has ever reported in as ever understood to be a pattern in uh, India's ornithological history. There was some suspicion that there's something different about the birds in certain parts of the country. But what we found looking at photos on eBird is that there's a clear geographic separation. All the birds in the south and in the east going into northeast, they're all white-headed birds in breeding plumage. All the ones in the west and the north are black-headed. There are some areas in some part of Uttarakhand, Nepal, the UP, where both seem to meet up. So this is a really interesting pattern. There's a clear geographic separation, and maybe these are even different species. And this is something that requires somebody to do genetic research and understand whether they are the same taxon or not, and how are they different. Okay, now quickly I'll go through some things about migration. So can you just uh, note down this question, Nafisa? I'll come back to it at the end. It's a long question. Right. So migration, there's a lot you can understand about migration from the data uploaded all over the world, like we showed in those red, green, yellow, blue maps. But also you can have animated maps. of migration. Some of you may have already seen some of these maps, and they can be really nice animated maps that are made that actually simulate migration. You can see the points moving, which is somewhat like the birds themselves moving, but they're not the birds moving. They're where people are reporting them. So if you download eBird data for any species, you can generate snapshot bird distributions at regular intervals at during different parts of the year. You can stitch them all together into a GIF. So everybody here, I'm sure, knows what a GIF is. And then you can look at a frequency chart that looks at how common it is at different parts of the year. All of this can be done with any statistical software. It's what I'm going to show from here on was done on R, a statistical software called R. So here's an example of migration within the subcontinent. This is Indian pitta. Now watch this graph, watch the map carefully. In winter, you see on the graph, you can see it going from January to December. As it comes closer to September, October, November, December, they all come down south. And then in the summer, they go up to the entire central and northern subcontinent. They leave the south. Then they come back to the south and Sri Lanka in winter. So you can visualize migration, and this is really useful to understand it better. You have birds that breed in the north and winter in the south, like we already discussed Blythe-Reed warbler. Here you can see all the Blythe-Reed warblers coming in, filling up the Indian subcontinent, and then all leaving in April, May, June, July, August. They're up there. And immediately they come back. It's actually this bird is much more in India than in its breeding areas. Some of them breed in the south and migrate north for the summer. This is Pallas fish eagle. They come down in winter to Corbett, Kaziranga, all of these places in the Terai, where they build their nests, and then in the summer they go back up north. This is very unique. Not many birds do this. Usually they breed in the summer and they come down for the winter. There are birds that move into Africa, and India is only a passing region they pass by. So passage migration through India, they all go into South and East Africa and then pass through India again on their way to China and Russia to breed Amur falcon. So you can see this movement in action. Yeah, and Gujarat Rodhi starling disappears for 3 months only. Yes, they just go for a brief period and then they're back in huge numbers. Then eastward migration into Southeast Asia and Australia. When Australia stopped all living elements coming in during COVID because they were worried about their population and worried about the diseases spreading there. One bird, many birds, but at least this one bird, white-throated needletail, the entire Himalayan population would travel to Australia and come back every year, even during that period. So you see, they go eastwards. There are other birds also that do this. But here's an example of opposite migration from the south to the north. So in the southern hemisphere, you know that winter and summer is flipped. So what we have here is Wilson storm petrel. They breed in the Antarctic, off the Antarctic islands. And during our winter. And in our summer, in the monsoon, when the waters are really choppy and crazy, they come and in our seas, in our open seas during our summer and monsoon. And then in our winter, they go down, which is their summer. In the north, it's winter. In the south, it's summer. So summer in the Antarctic, they breed, and that's winter for us. So it's just interesting to think about. You can also compare migratory routes. So there's a brown shrike and Isabelline shrike. You see that they have this parallel migratory route. They even breed next to each other. You have brown shrike, you have Isabelline shrike, Isabelline and brown shrike, and then you have them moving like this. There are also new migratory routes that you discover through this yellow-browed warbler. So yellow-browed warbler sometime back was thought to breed in Eurasia and come to Southeast Asia, Northeast India and Southeast Asia. But over the last 10-15 years, there's been an entire new migratory route that goes westwards. And now they're all over Europe in winter and they go into West Africa also. So this is a new route. Did this develop because of climate change? Did this develop because of some other reason? A lot of this was discovered by bird watchers. These new routes developing. Some interesting phenomena, like for example, this Arctic warbler has expanded its range further and further west. What has happened is that its breeding range has gone further and further west, but it continues to winter in Southeast Asia. So birds that are breeding all the way in Norway, Finland, and those areas are passing by like this horizontally and then coming down. Although actually it would make much more sense for them to cut across the country, maybe cut across India and go, but they don't. They're sticking to their old migratory routes, although their breeding areas have shifted by thousands of kilometers. Similarly for northern Meteor, but in the opposite direction. The birds that breed in Alaska are actually crossing the entire Russian continent and then going down into Africa. But previously they didn't breed so far east. So they've constantly shifted their breeding range, but their wintering areas remain the same. So they're traveling many thousands of kilometers more than they used to, some of those populations. So anyway, lots for you to discover, lots for you to learn. Go to migration maps on the Bird Count India website and see what you can learn from that. I'll quickly mention bird atlases. This is the systematic monitoring that I spoke of. And this is something that I think you should all read. This is available online. Read as much as you can about the Kerala Bird Atlas. It was a wonderful initiative where all bird watchers from Kerala came together and they systematically monitored it. Everybody followed a protocol. They went to certain cells that were selected previously, certain sites. Over there, they followed a fixed protocol and they monitored birds. And that has set up a beautiful baseline in Kerala. When the atlas is repeated, there is a lot of learning that you can have because analysis is very easy. Because the protocols are fixed. Everybody is doing the same thing. Then quickly about conservation threat monitoring. There's bird collisions with glass, and that's a huge problem in many parts of the world. Many birds die when they collide with glass. We don't know about the problem in India too much at the moment, but almost 1 billion birds die every year in the US from collisions with glass. And one of the best ways to convince people to stop using glass, because this is something people can easily do. It's not very important, but most people are not aware that it creates such damage. For that, you need information. You need to tell them how many birds are dying. You need to tell them there is an impact of using glass buildings and glass facades. This is an example from India where 30 rosy starlings died I think in Ahmedabad after hitting a building. But we don't know. We didn't know what the impact of this problem was. But now, thanks to citizen science data and thanks to rescue centers that are also serving as repositories of public knowledge. Now, when rescue centers team up with citizen scientists, there's a lot you can find out even about very difficult problems like this. So, using a combination of data available from different sources, some people have found that this is broadly, these are some preliminary findings of how many birds are dying from collisions and which species are most impacted. And it looks like some species like Indian pitta, quail, white-cheeked barbet, and oriental dwarf kingfisher are especially impacted by glass and collisions. Does this mean that it's a big threat for the species? We don't know yet. But what we know is that in autumn, this is when species are most impacted. This is when um, pitta and oriental dwarf kingfisher, two very beautiful birds, are killed the most. And you can see here in November, almost 18 pittas in this data set have died from collisions with glass. And this is during the migratory period. So these birds become especially prone during the migratory period. So how does this help us? What you can do is if you see somebody with a glass building near you, maybe if you live near a slightly forested area, wooded area, you can go tell them that for these 2 months, see if you can provide something that tells a bird that this is glass. Because the problem is birds can't make out. It looks transparent and they go through. And there are things that you can do to the glass that make it visible to a bird. And using this data, this is something we've already been able to do. There are some big companies that have actually now implemented some bird-friendly glass based on this data that has come from citizen science. If many people start doing it, then it can have great impacts for conservation. This is for other birds. Aside from pitta and oriental dwarf kingfisher, it looks like the impact is the same year round. It's not seasonal. So for these birds in areas which don't have pitta and oriental dwarf kingfisher, it needs to be a more general solution. It cannot only be during some months. So these are really important insights that you can get from the data. And finally, last bit, population trend. Then somebody asked, why do you need 15-minute checklist daily? Why do you need so many checklists? That is because these checklists, the more the number of checklists you have, the better you are able to calculate frequency of reporting or how likely it is for a bird to be reported. Why is that important? Let's say now species A has been reported in 5 out of 5 checklists. Species B has been reported in 3 out of 5 checklists. Now, this is one species has been reported in 100% of the checklists. Species B has been reported in 60% of the checklists. Now, if you have, instead of 5 checklists, if you have 100 checklists, if you have 1,000 checklists, the amount of the resolution that you have in this frequency of reporting becomes better and better and better. And you see those error bars, the uncertainty will become smaller and smaller in terms of our understanding of its frequency of reporting. Why is frequency of reporting important? Because if you look at frequency of reporting today of that bird and you compare it to what it was 5 years back, and you compare that with what it was 5 years before that, you can get an understanding of whether how likely you are to see that species has changed over time. And we can see that for species like vultures. For vultures, now the frequency of reporting is extremely low, whereas 20 years back or 25 years back, the frequency was extremely high. It was a very common bird across the country. So that tells us that there's been a big decline of vultures. And that is also telling us many other stories of increase or decline around the country. Uh, and one or two examples, what has happened to this bird? Can somebody tell me? Anybody? Comment. Now you can unmute yourself. It's almost over. Unmute yourself and say whatever you feel like. Yes, anybody? Counts are slowly increasing. Anyone else? There were many comments when I didn't ask questions, but when I ask questions, nobody comments.
I didn't hear I couldn't get the question.
Okay, what has happened to this bird? Has it increased over time? Has it decreased over time? What is this bird? Everybody is aware, I think.
Peacock, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's there. I think I'm not sure, but I see lots of peacocks in Manipal, lots and lots.
Right.
And they destroy crops.
That's true. So peafowl.
Yeah, one sec. I'll answer the question, Ashwin. I was here 30 years and there was lots of peacocks in the forest in Manipal. When the forest was denuded, there are very less peacocks.
Okay. That's interesting.
This is observation without eBird. So since I unmute myself, it was an amazing talk. For 30 years, I didn't see birds in Manipal. Then I met Ramit and I'm 68 now. And for 5 years, I'm birding. And you told me the importance of citizen science. Thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. In Hyderabad, KBR Park, there are hundreds of peacocks. It's a beautiful place for morning walk and evening also.
Okay.
Hundreds of peacocks are there. It is maintained by Forest Department.
I see.
In Hyderabad.
Okay. Yeah, I've been there.
I usually visit very frequently there.
Thanks. Anybody else? More peafowls in Kerala of late? Okay. So peafowl.
Hello, sir. I am from Gandhinagar.
Tell me.
Before 5 years, peafowls is all they are walking with me. But nowadays, due to the development, metro and everything, we lost the population of peafowl in our area.
Okay. Interesting. So many different, so this is a good example of how these patterns are different locally. What is happening to people around my house may not be the same around somebody else's place. But that's why it's very difficult for us to truly understand what is going on without a data set that represents a large area. So if you want to find out what's happening to people around the country, what you need to do is analyze the data for the entire country. And then you see that peafowl are actually one of the most rapidly increasing birds in the country as a whole. They have come into areas where they were never there. The entire Western Ghats, peafowl were missing previously. The whole state of Kerala, even 20, 25 years back, only 2 districts in Kerala had peafowl, and there it was uncommon. Now peafowl is there in every single district, and it's a common bird across the state. It's reached parts of the Himalayas. It's reached 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 meters in the Himalayas, in Sikkim, in Uttarakhand. So peafowl are doing incredibly well. Even in the region near my house, there were no peafowl even 15 years back. And now they have expanded, and there's such an abundant bird in this area. So there are, this is what the data says. And it's nice in a way that such a beautiful bird is common. But what are the impacts of this on the environment? What are the impacts of this on farmers? So there are many things to think about. That while it is a really nice bird, are they damaging crops? Are they having an impact on reptiles and other important constituents of our ecosystem? Once you have the data, you can start asking further questions. Now we know that peafowl has increased. Similarly, I don't have the graph here, but sparrows, there is the narrative that sparrows have decreased, right? Everywhere, and sparrows are in danger, they are threatened. But actually, the data says that sparrows are declining only in the cities. Whereas in the country as a whole, a lot of rural areas, lots of villages, sparrows are doing perfectly fine. So actually, in the context of the country, sparrows are the last bird we need to care about in the country as a whole. Locally, we all want sparrows to come back around us, but for that we need to have some kind of food available for them. And there are a lot of stories that about sparrow declines related to mobile towers, radiation. None of that has any scientific evidence. The only scientific evidence that we have about why sparrows have declined in the cities or in some other parts of the world is because of a lack of food and a lack of place to nest in as construction has changed. So, just why data is important, why it's important to have evidence-based understanding of trends. So this is another one, northern pintail, a relatively common duck, unfortunately has crashed. Unlike peafowl, there's been a huge decline in northern pintail. We still see it in many wetlands, but we are 80% less likely to see it today than 30 years back. So it's just a direction for us to think more about and understand why this is happening and eventually try and do something about it. This is a graph where you can see many species, many large water bird species together. And the way to understand this graph is that you have a line here, pre-2000 baseline, and wherever the point ends for a particular species, above or below the line, that much is the change compared to the pre-2000, compared to before 2000. So compared to before 2000, purple heron has increased by 50%. Compared to before 2000, there is no change in painted stock, right? Compared to before 2000, glossy ibis has increased by almost 200%. And this is true all over the world, not just from India. So these are some interesting trends. But one thing that will catch your eye over here is spoonbill. Spoonbill seems to have declined a lot in the country as a whole. Similarly, spotbill pelican did very well earlier. You see that it had increased by more than 100% until 2010 and just beyond that. But since then, it has been declining rapidly. So these trends tell us things that can then help us prioritize species for conservation. This is all there in the State of India's Birds report. I urge you all to go to the website, take a look at the SYB website and explore many trends, many of the results, read the report in detail. There's lots of information in there, not just about trends, but about threats, about policy recommendations. There are many different interesting angles in the report, and all of you do take a look at that in detail. Okay, and finally, some opportunities and challenges that depend upon the entire community of citizen scientists, of the general public, of professional researchers, and there's an opportunity for many more systematic efforts, like atlases, where the protocol is fixed. So if you're part of some birdwatching group, talk to them about systematic efforts and why systematic efforts are important and are much better than casual birding to be able to understand uh, trends, to understand distributions, etc. use all of these resources. This is an opportunity again, because there are so many of us that are interested in ornithology, and all of these resources are available, like the eBird website, like SYB, all of the data that is downloadable, but we're not making use of it. We're not making use of this information and this knowledge that is available to us with a few clicks. So start exploring these websites, learn as much as you can by going around these websites. And it's something that I try to do a lot. Just explore all of these websites and see how much I can learn from the various resources that are already out there. Of course, it's important that we produce more and more such resources to learn from. But the existing existing world of resources is so rich that there's so much we can learn from what is already out there. And that will lead to better science in the future. There's also curation of data quality. This is something I didn't speak about, but on all citizen science platforms, there's community involvement also in curating data, because there are many new bird watchers, there are many new naturalists that upload to iNaturalist, and through this entire process, there is a lot of training, lot of education that anybody who's experienced in these platforms can do. You can go and see whether some species is misidentified. You can report those photos. You can talk to your to other bird watchers locally, find out more, and address certain problems in the distribution. Sometimes not everything is going to be accurate on these platforms. So the way for us to get more and more accurate, and therefore be better and better suited to science, is for everybody to be engaged in its curation. So all of you, I again encourage you to be engaged in the curation of the data in these platforms. And learn how to download the data. Somebody asked a question, how do you download it? There is a Bird Count India YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, there are a couple of R tutorials on R and with Excel, where we go through the entire process of where the data is, how do you download it, and how do you analyze the data after that to some extent. And I think R might sound very overwhelming because it's a programming language, but actually it's what is called a high-level programming language. It's actually very easy compared to some of the things like the C++ and Java, etc. R is very user-friendly. And if any of you spend some time with it, I'm sure you'll be able to learn R. But many things can also be done on Excel. And tutorials are there for both on the BirdCount India YouTube channel. So this is R. This is what R looks like. It doesn't look very nice, but it's a really, really wonderful tool. And publications from the community. So what I'm showing here are publications by birdwatchers. These are not many people are not professional scientists earlier, but everybody is getting engaged in science. And this is just from 2021. There have been many, many more publications that have come in the last few years. And I hope to see publications from all of you. Publications are not just for the sake of publications. Every publication advances our collective knowledge. So they're really important as a community goal. So I hope all of you will start using all of this data and publishing from it. And now I'll take some questions. I see there are a lot of comments here. Yeah, so painted stocks used to be near threatened, but increasing knowledge in the past few years shows that it doesn't qualify for the cutoff for near threatened. Previously, painted stocks used to be in a much worse situation. So now, so IUCN has very strict cutoffs for when a species is near threatened, when is it vulnerable. Sometimes we say as a matter of speaking that this bird is threatened, this bird is not. But the IUCN thresholds are very strict. So it needs to qualify for certain criteria to come into that category. And at the moment, painted stock doesn't come into that category. Thanks, Nafisa, for posting that question again. I'll just look at the others and then come to that.
Okay.
On eBird, is it possible to enter a username and see all? No, you cannot. So that is because of there are privacy concerns. So people can, some people don't mind having their profiles. You have your profiles, And in your profile, you can see what all checklists were made recently. But many people don't want others to see that. That's available publicly if you download the data, but on the website itself, you cannot see what that person, where that person has been, what they've been reporting. And that's important because everybody should have the right to not have all of the information public like that. So this is because of privacy.
I understand. Oh, I saw a Coimbatore group, which had been like a, I forgot what was the word you used, like a protocol-based birdwatching group, and they had published their username, I think, on Bird Count India, but it was their eBird username. So I was wondering how I can look at what they had uploaded, which is why I asked.
So you can see the username, but you can't use the username to see what all they've uploaded.
I understand. So if I happen to come across a reporting, then I will know that this is from that username.
Yes.
From
the
okay,
name.
cool. Thank you.
And if you download the data, you can look further at what people have been reporting. But the data is always there's a month. Every month the data is updated. The downloadable data is updated, so you can't see where people have just been in the immediate past.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Wilson storm petrels don't breed in India; they breed in the Antarctic. IUCN threshold for category is very complicated. Go to the IUCN website, and you'll see a whole list of categories. It's a complex set of criteria. Also on SOIB, you can check. There's also been a red listing that was done for India's birds based on state of India's birds, and that is also part of the report. So you can check that as well. How is double counting minimized or avoided? Yes, so the same bird can be counted at the same place by different people. In fact, when let's say if I make 5 checklists at home today, I might be counting the same 5 birds 10 times in 10 different checklists. Now, this is not a problem at all because every checklist is a unit of data. And within that, every observation. What is happening is now you're not taking these 2 checklists, you cannot add the number of individuals seen and say that you're seeing so many individuals. The way that eBird data is used is that you look at these 10 checklists, and then if red-whiskered bulbul, let's say the same red-whiskered bulbul was seen in all 10 checklists, then you can say that red-whiskered bulbul was seen in 100% of the checklists today. You're not putting a number. So counting, double counting is not important. Only the number in a single checklist is important. And you cannot add those numbers. So all of these are very important things to remember while analyzing the data. If you are actually going to be counting all of these as different individuals, that is not correct. So here your understanding of the data becomes very important. Now I'll take the big question. Let me go back to it. I have a question on the data being collected. While location is reported, I've seen people rushing to the sites in large numbers, and while doing so, disturb the birds in their habitat. So this is the responsibility of the community. So the important thing, like I'll tell you my opinion, I think there are far, far, far bigger threats to birds than bird watchers. How much ever somebody comes in, how much ever somebody goes to see a bird and creates a little bit of disturbance in that area, that's nothing compared to the kind of impact that our general lives, the way that industries set up in India, the way that people keep clearing up land and building houses. All of us do that, and there's so many industries, there's so much land that is taken up continuously in the country, all of which result in the loss of so many birds. What is important for us, I think, at least in my opinion, as a community, we need to start appreciating birds more and more. And people seeing birds, people listening, people enjoying birds through bird watching is, I think, critical for us as a community to start appreciating birds more. Even if one new person who today is not interested in birds at all, if I'm able to get them to go to a place and see a bird and appreciate it, I would feel that that is a victory for conservation, because then that person is going to go and take so many other steps to be able to conserve birds. For example, the people who are doing the bird collisions thing and have got their companies. These are big IT companies, but I cannot reveal the names. Big IT companies, they've got them to have bird-friendly glass. And this is because there's one concerned bird watcher in that entire company. Now, the impact that something like that has is huge, whereas the impact that that person is going to have in one particular area when they go to see a bird is actually small, and there is great opportunity for education. What we should do as a community, though, it's not right for people to trample a habitat or destroy a nest or anything like that while watching birds. But the way to do that is not to tell people not to go there. It's to make sure that when people go there, they are educated. You tell them that, okay, these birds, there are some things that can disturb them. There are some things that don't. It's also important that these birds are seen by other people as well. So make sure that you don't chase it away. You have a responsibility to your fellow person. The only reason you are seeing that bird is because somebody else saw it and told you about it or made it public. So when you come there, you should not be chasing the bird away. It's important that the next person also gets to see it and enjoy it in the same way. And this is the kind of education that needs to come through. Even when you're seeing, even when the owl roosts. So what they have done in many places in Europe is that whoever finds the owl roost tells people about it, but they put up a small fence around it with a board saying that keep this distance away from the owl. And then everybody learns that this is what they need to do. And they also explain why you need to keep this distance away from the owl. Because it's not just for the owls, but there are potentially hundreds of people who can derive so much happiness from going and seeing those. The moment you go close to that tree and you scare off all the owls, you're actually you're not being a nice citizen. You are actually being thoughtless about so many other people who are going to follow you. So I think a lot of this sensitization comes from explaining to people what their impact is on other people. And when everybody enjoys those birds, learns about them, appreciates them, then the impact on conservation is huge. So I believe in everybody should see birds, use whatever tools available to be able to see and enjoy birds. But in that process, we should be, in a very nice way, explaining to people how to do it without restricting access. So one question from the Google Sheet. Yes, I should take that. Uh, there is so much that we don't know about India's birds at the moment. There is so much. We like you say, we don't even know about the basic biology of a common bird around us. If the red-whiskered bulbul that is everywhere, bulbuls are everywhere in the country, but we know so little about their breeding biology. We know so little about their movements, about their internal physiology. We know nothing about them. But now is the time that we're going to start learning with so many new ornithologists in the country. So this is something that I think will develop very fast. We're going to learn more and more. But if you want to know everything that is known at the moment about a certain bird, go to Birds of the World. And Birds of the World is a paid website, but it's free to everybody in India through their eBird account. So you just have to create an eBird account and open it up. And that is a one-stop place for everything that is known about a particular bird. So if there is some study about its breeding biology, if people know how many eggs there are, eggs it lays, if somebody knows about its conservation threats, it's going to be on Birds of the World. And it's constantly updated. Sometimes the latest knowledge will not be there, but it is the best place to go to learn whatever we know about a certain bird species. Okay, so something more about the Palkat and Goa Gap. Apologies if I've missed some questions. There's many comments that have come in. About the Palakkad Gap and Goa Gap, I think people like Robin would be much better placed to explain these biogeographic gaps. But it's basically areas which are different from the surrounding habitat. So Palakkad Gap is an area of plains. On both sides of the Palakkad Gaps, you have mountains and forests. So what has happened is that historically birds have been isolated on both sides of the gap, and they're not able to cross from one side to the other, and they're not able to use the plains habitat in the gap. So that's why you have birds, some species that are not found in the gap but are found on both sides. This is also why you sometimes have different species on both sides of the gap, because they've been isolated for really long. These are birds that can't fly very well, like the Sholakilies. They're not able to fly from one side to the other. So for hundreds of thousands of years, they've been isolated, and therefore they're different species on both sides. They've evolved separately for a long time. So that's why these gaps are important. Gaps are basically unsuitable habitat. So you can even have a situation where you have plains on two sides and you have a huge mountain in between, and birds are not able to cross the mountain. So on two sides of the mountain, you might actually have different species because they've been isolated for a long time. None of those species are able to live on the mountain. Species on the mountain are not able to live down. Does that make sense? Goa Gap is again it's another similar, conceptually similar, that it's a region of habitat that is unsuitable, that is different from the habitat on both sides. So birds are not able to cross. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I hope I've answered every question. Oh, I see there's one by Andrilla. Red-winged bulbul of northeast have a brown patch in their cheek. They migrate to the western part of India. Yes. So the reason they look different is actually because they're not mixing. So this is when these clear differences develop. When they're mixing, when you have, let's say, something like verditer flycatcher that moves all over the country. That's why all over the country they look the same, right? Verditer flycatchers. But if you have a situation like red-vented bulbul, a bird that is non-migratory, that is somewhat isolated. There are populations in different parts of the country that have evolved separately. That's why they've started to look a little different. But also red-vented bulbul hasn't been isolated for as long in these places. There is some level of mixing. That's why they're not so different from each other. They're the same species. But if you have something like a Sholakili or let's say something like jungle nightjar, there's jungle nightjar and grey nightjar in the Himalayas, jungle nightjar in the plains, and they've been isolated for long enough that they've got different calls. And once you have different breeding calls, you're likely not going to breed with each other. So then they end up being different species.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions. There were a lot for this session. So your talk has been very interesting, and thank you so much for sparing your time for this session. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
So if our some of the students have been asking for your email.
Yeah, feel free to share.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'll paste it here, the NCF email.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, I wish there's a lot that I crammed into one session. There is much more that can be covered in greater detail over a longer period. But I think we can have conversations for anybody who's interested. Feel free to email me and we can have longer conversations about anything that you're interested in from this talk.
Thank you so much. I'll just paste mail. I pasted the email, so let me know. Yeah, it should be correct. Thank you so much for your talk. And sorry, so this concludes our list of guest sessions for this course this year. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined in. Sorry we went a little over time, but still thank you so much for taking the time for attending to all the questions. And thank you to all the students as well who participated in this.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've received a couple of questions regarding the past year's question papers. I've had a discussion with the other professors, and I'm not sure if we can release the past year's question papers, but I'll try to mail NPTEL regarding which question papers can be released. But a great portion of if you just look through all the assignment questions, it'll help you a lot in the exam. That's all I can say. And the exam is purely MCQ based. So, since I understand that some of you might also be a little anxious regarding the exams, so I just want to say that you can start, you can still put up questions in the forum, and this week I'll try to get cleared as possible since if you have any other doubts before the exam. And regarding the exam centers, we've tried to get NPTEL um, to ask them regarding when they'll be releasing the exam dates, but I think you all have gotten an announcement in at the NPTEL dashboard regarding the fact that they'll be releasing it a week before the exam. And we're sorry for that as well, but we can't help it either because from our end, like when we can't control the exam hall dates and all that. How to join the forum? There's a Google group forum that you can join. I'll just paste it here. Also, you can join the forum via the dashboard. Also, there's one option where it says ask a question, and I think that automatically takes you to the discussion forum. I I'll just paste the email. Okay, so I hope I've answered most of the questions for you. Thank you so much for being a part of this course, and thank you so much for joining in and taking the time for all the guest lectures. We'll be having the last live session tomorrow with Dr. Robin for this week's recorded lectures. So, just kindly join in. It's at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you so much and good night.